You got pain. He's a pain taker. You feel lost. He's the way maker. Oh, if you need freedom, saving. He's a prison shake. You say, oh, you got chains. He's a chain breaker. You believe it, you receive it, if you can feel it, somebody testify. If you believe it, if you receive it, you can feel it, somebody testify. You believe it, oh, you receive it, you can feel it, somebody testify, testify. You believe it, you receive it, you can feel it, somebody testify. You got pain, he's a pain taker. Oh, if you feel low, he's a way maker. If you need freedom, a saving, he's a prison shaking savior. You got chains, he's a chain breaker. Oh, if you need freedom, a saving, he's a prison shaking savior. You got chains, he's the chain breaker. If you believe it, if you believe it, if you receive it, oh, if you can feel it, somebody testify. If you believe it, if you receive it, if you can feel it, somebody testify, testify. You got pain, he's a pain taker. Oh, if you feel lost, he's a way maker. If you need freedom of saving, he's a prison shaking savior. You got chains, he's the chain breaker. If you need freedom of saving, he's a prison shaking savior. You got chains, he's a chain breaker. Amen. Though nothing can separate, even if I ran away, your love never fails. No, I still make mistakes, but you have your mercy for me every day. Your love never fails. You say same through the ages. pain in the night, but joy comes in the morning. And when the oceans rage, I don't have to be afraid, because I know that you love me. Your love never fails. Sing this at home, you make. Well, you make all things work together for my good. You make all things work together for my good. You make all things work together for my good. You make all things work together for my good. Oh, yeah. You stay the same through the ages. Your love never changes. It may be pain in the night, but joy comes in the morning. And when the ocean rage, I don't have to be afraid, because I know that you love me. Your love never fails. Your love never fails. No, no, no. Amen. It's great to see you guys, Coast Life Church. Glad that you're here virtually watching us this morning. We're glad that you decided to tune in this morning. We're going to allow you an opportunity this morning to spread the gospel to all your friends and family and to people in your community group on Facebook. If you will share the link that you're watching right now on Facebook Live, so that others that are on your timeline who see your feed can also see what God's doing through our ministry here at Coast Life Church. You'll be obeying the commands of Scripture. I think Pastor D would attest to that. This is your opportunity to call out the Great Commission and to live that out. You can just press share. It's just one easy opportunity for you to do that this morning. We're glad you're here watching. We want as many people as possible to watch. If you're with us this morning and you're new, you can drop a comment in the comment box to tell us that you're here and that you're new and that you're watching us. There is a link above us. If you need prayer, you can click on that link. And you can type in your prayer request there, and somebody will pray for you. Also, if you need any help at all, if maybe you're struggling through this crisis that we're going through, and you need some help from the church, you can click on that link. It will help out in any way that we can. And then also, if you're willing to give to what God's doing through our ministry, through your tithe and offering, you can click on that link as well, and it'll lead you to that. Man, we're so glad you're here. We want you to comment on Facebook. We want you to interact with us during this service. This is a really cool way to worship, because it's not often during the worship service when people are here that you can just blurt something out and raise your hand. People look at you like you're crazy if you do that in worship. But on Facebook, you can just type in what you want, and we're glad that you're doing that. So please type, comment, interact with the services that goes on. We're glad that you're here. We're glad that you're watching. We're going to continue on with some worship. We love y'all, man. I can't wait till this church is filled back up with human beings. We miss you guys. We'll be glad to see you again. We're going to continue on some worship, but thank you for watching. Worthy of all the praise we could ever bring. Worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. Jesus, the name above every other name. Jesus, the only one who could ever save. He's worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. Yes, we live for you. 'Cause holy, there is no one like you. There is none beside you. Open up my eyes in wonder. Show me who you are and fill me with your heart and lead me in your love to those around me. Worthy of every song we could ever sing. Worthy of all the praise we could ever bring. Worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. Jesus, the name above every other name. Jesus, the only one who could ever save. He's worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. Oh, we live for you. Holy is holy. There is no one like you. There is none beside you. Open up my there is none beside you. Open up my eyes and wonder. Show me who you are and fill me with your heart and lead me in your love to those around me. Slowly, there is no one like you. There is none beside you. Open up my eyes and wonder. Show me who you are and fill me with your heart and lead me in your love to those around me. Holy, there is no one like you. There is none beside you. Open up my eyes and wonder. Show me who you are and fill me with your heart and lead me in your love to those around me. Jesus, thank you this morning, God, that that's true, God, that you'll build our lives up in a way, God, that we could never even imagine, God, and we could never even fathom, God. We can't even know the depths of the love that you have for us and the things that you want for our lives, God. Thank you for looking out for us, God. Thank you for being a father, God, that cares about us, God, that cares about us in times of need. We thank you, God, this morning that our message this morning, God, your message through us, I should say this morning, God, is reaching thousands and thousands of people because of the technology you provided for us, God. I'm thankful for that. Thank you that we get to reach our church family. God, I pray for all this to end soon. God, it sounds like probably a selfish prayer, Jesus, but I'm really ready to get back to see people in church, God, and see people out in the community. God, I ask that you just allow this thing to end as quickly as possible, God, so that people can get back to the church, God, we can get back to worshiping corporately, God, with and around each other. Jesus, thank you for our pastor, God. Thank you for his willingness, God, to serve you, God, to lead our church, God. Thank you for his family, God, and how they support him. I ask that you continue to bless him and his family in a very special and mighty way, God. Please continue to bless our church. God, we've been able to do so many things in your name recently, God. We ask that you continue to allow us, God, as a body of believers to serve you, God, and we ask that you allow us to do it for the glory of your kingdom, God, and to not boast in ourselves, God, but to boast in you, God, and your throne, God, and the dominion that you have over the earth. We're just grateful for that, God. Please help this service, God, just be in the homes, God, and the hearts of the people that are watching, God, and the people that are here this morning, God, and just bless us and help us to have a wonderful day. In your son's name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thanks to all of you. Thank you there at home for bringing this worship service, actually attending this worship service where you are, for allowing your living room, your kitchen, bedroom, if you're at work right now, the place where you work, allowing that to become our extended auditorium, our extended worship center, our extended sanctuary, whereby you, with all of us, get to celebrate the reality that Jesus is in charge, that he is in control, that we have nothing to fear, and that doubt itself is being destroyed by God working out all that he is choosing to work out in these days for his glory and for our good. That sounds a little bit like the end of a sermon, but it really is the beginning, because today we are going to talk about crushing doubt and fear. Just say that at home where you are. Crushing doubt and fear, because those things have just really taken over worldwide in these past weeks as this virus has captured all of our attention and has then been used as an opportunity for the expansion of the gospel, which I've talked about quite a lot. It is the doubt and the fear part that we want to focus on today, though, because those two things can just stymie the work of God in your life. Not that he becomes weaker, but they become a blockade that we put up by ourselves to prevent our experiencing what he is actively doing. And our example today is a guy who is famous for doubting. His name was Thomas. We know very little about the Apostle Thomas. There are some historical details about him that are I don't know that they're really argued, but everybody doesn't agree necessarily with what happened in Thomas's life after the ascension. But we all agree what happened in his life immediately after the resurrection, and even some time before that. So we're going to talk about Thomas today, and I bet that we will all find a piece of Thomas in our own personalities, and maybe a little bit of our own personalities in him as we talk about crushing doubt and fear. If there is going to truly be, no, there is going to be a true awakening. I'm sorry that I started it that way. If you and I are going to experience the ongoing awakening that is happening around the world, then you and I have the right, the privilege, and the tools to squelch doubt and fear in our hearts and our minds and our lives and our families, to truly crush them. And Thomas is going to be our example today. So if you would, please turn to John chapter 11. If you're using a paper Bible this morning, that's excellent. If you're using an electronic Bible of some kind in your tablet or computer or your phone, then that's fantastic. If you're using the YouVersion app, then that's excellent. All the verses are going to be there for you. If you've not downloaded that, you can download it for free. Go to your app store, find the YouVersion, download it, and then on Sundays, you just go to the events. I messed this up in first service too. You go to the events area in YouVerse, then you find YouVersion, and then you find Coast Life Church, and then click on the Live tab, and then all the notes and some of the notes and all the verses I'm going to read will pop up there. I have really got to be more smooth about the way I talk about the YouVersion app. If you haven't got it, get it. If you're using a paper Bible, electronic Bible, excellent. We're going to just be in John today, starting with John chapter 11. And this is our introduction to the personality of our good friend Thomas, who I will probably accidentally call Tom a couple times today. I don't mean that as any disrespect. It just happens. So this is the narrative that was going on around this little portion of Scripture that we're going to read. Jesus and his disciples were traveling around as they did. They were in the north, up closer to the area where Jesus grew up, where he spent a good portion of his ministry time. Just in the northern part of Israel. Judea was the southern portion of Israel. And in Judea, there was the city Jerusalem, which you know, and Bethany, which you may also know, which was very nearby. Jesus and his disciples were in the north. His good friend Lazarus and his sisters, Mary and Martha, lived in southern Israel, in Bethany, again, just outside of Jerusalem. And while they were traveling, Jesus got news, someone brought him a message, that Lazarus was very sick. And so the disciples, I think, probably immediately imagined, we don't really want to go back to Judea. Jesus had a lot of enemies in and around Jerusalem, people who wanted him dead, religious leaders who despised him. And they all knew that, and that was part of the reason why he would spend more time in the north. Not because he was afraid, but just because he had a lot to do. And those people were a huge distraction to the development of the gospel, the expansion of the gospel in the very early days when he was in the south. It just... The focus was always very different, so he enjoyed being in the north, it seems. He received this message. The disciples also heard it. Lazarus is sick. And probably thought, we don't really want to go to Jerusalem, or, to near Jerusalem, around Bethany. I wonder what's going to happen. Jesus didn't go right away. He stayed there where he was. He continued to minister and preach and teach and be as all the wonderful things that he is. And then after a couple of days, then he says, all right, we're now going to go see Lazarus in Bethany. And the disciples are like, what? The message has come that he had fallen asleep. And the disciples said, well, if he's asleep, we should let him rest. That's what he needs. If Lazarus was sick and now he's sleeping, well, then he needs to go ahead and sleep until he is completely well. That's where we pick up in John 11, verse 14. Then Jesus told them plainly, Lazarus has died. And for your sake, I'm glad that I was not there, so that you may believe. But let us go to him. Here comes Thomas. So Thomas, called the twin, said to his fellow disciples, let us also go, that we may die with him. Quite a remarkable statement by Thomas. But let's clarify before we really look into what Thomas has just said. Jesus, who they are now steadily accepting, they have not completely come to understand how glorious he is, how majestic he is, that he is in fact God. But they are coming along and understanding that little by little. And the news comes that their friend Lazarus in Bethany is sick. Jesus doesn't go right away to heal him, as they all now believe that he can do. he hesitates. And then after Lazarus has passed away, the information comes that Lazarus has died. And then Jesus says, all right, now it's time for us to go and see Lazarus. And they're like, what? What? I don't understand. They don't want to go to Bethany because it's dangerous there. It's dangerous to him. It's dangerous to them, they perceive. And Jesus says, no, this is how it had to be. I'm glad that he has passed away. It is for your sake that I was not there to heal him, to prevent this from happening, so that you may believe. So let us now go to him. Then Thomas says, let us also go that we may die with him. Thomas was doing really what all the other disciples were doing as well, and what we do. He was allowing his imagination to construct his reality. His reality was determined completely on what he was imagining might happen. And that is a soul-crushing problem that we all have. When we allow our reality to be completely constructed by things that are not real. So we have to ask ourselves, is my reality real? Is what I think happening actually happening? Is what I'm afraid of potentially happening going to happen? And do I allow that to dictate how I act right now? Because I'm afraid, because I'm in doubt, because I am resistant, in fact, and this is true, because I am resistant to the truth that Jesus lives in me, that everything is under his control, then everything is going to be okay. And ultimately, he's using everything for his glory and my good. Everything works together for your good and for mine as we are Christ's followers. So, Thomas gets a little bit of a bad rap. I mean, what we're going to read a little bit later is really the reason that he does after the resurrection. But here, he's just saying what they're all thinking and won't say. You know, I always think, and I sort of connect with Peter because I'm thinking that, often I'm thinking Peter is the guy who did that. And the truth is, Peter is the guy who did that the most. He just spouted off. Whatever was in his head came out of his mouth, which is what I like about him because I'm exactly the same way. And my dad, who is watching this right now, would always tell me, Dwayne, watch what you say. And I would say, nah, I'm just going to go ahead and say whatever's in my mind, and I still do it now. And you that attend here all the time know that that's true. I will think it, and I will say it, and then I will think, maybe I shouldn't have said that. And it's gotten me in trouble many times, as my dad has promised me. Peter was quite a lot like that. But apparently, Thomas had a little bit of that in his soul too. Because they were all thinking, we don't want to go to Bethany. Jesus, it's dangerous for you there. It's dangerous for us there. Let's not go. But Jesus was the boss, and he said, we're going. And then Thomas says what they're thinking, and that is, my imagination has Jesus dead and all of us dead, so let's just go with him so that if he's going to die, at least we can all die together. I wish that there was a follow-up to that commentary. I want to know, what was the conversation like as they made their way down the path, probably around Samaria, but maybe right through it, whichever way they went. However they made their way back, people were like, man, Thomas, you shouldn't have said that. Why would, yeah. And Thomas saying something like, I just said what you were thinking. We should not be going to Bethany right now. It is dangerous down there, but here we go. Jesus smiling and happy and on his way to go do a miracle. I'm imagining, because he knows what's going to happen. He is divine. And so that's how we come to know how he thinks. We're going to continue looking at Thomas's life because that miracle that he then experienced when they arrived at Bethany must have been earth-shattering for him. And I mean that in a good way. His earth needed to be shattered. You'll remember, I'm just going to refresh your memory. They arrived in Bethany. Lazarus had been in the grave for some time. Jesus said, take away the stone. They said, no, that's gross. He's been dead for days. And Jesus said, take away the stone. Then he prayed. Then he called to Lazarus, come out, and they all witnessed Lazarus alive from the dead after having been dead for days. And you can imagine how startled they were, how surprised they were, how excited they were, how opposite this was from what they had imagined was going to happen, especially because of what Thomas had said. Certainly from what Thomas had imagined had happened. And it did create a sort of an uproar, a stir in the religious community, and these guys were like, man, we have got to get rid of Jesus. He raised a man from the dead. I mean, it is crazy how backwards their thinking was. As Jesus continued to prove who he was, they increased their efforts to destroy him, only because they had to, so that you and I could be saved. I think of Thomas's that moment when Lazarus comes out of the tomb. Thomas, who had been thinking we're going to Bethany to die, actually sees that Jesus has come to Bethany to expand life, to return life to Lazarus. And how that must have been begin to feel, to think what I imagined was just not reality, and my reality is so much better than what I imagined. You and I need that. And you have had those moments. You have had moments where you were expecting the very worst, but what God produced was the very best. When it seemed like this is a nightmare that will never end, there is no resolution. And while you are going through it, God just turns the knob a little bit. He adjusts and makes things work right that you knew would never work. There was never going to be any resolution. That person was never going to be okay. And then God just said, I've got it. And he makes things right when we were just convinced they were going to be wrong. We must not let our imagination dictate our reality. Is your reality real? Is my reality real? What I'm imagining as being real, is that really what God is doing? We just can't let that happen. We just cannot let our crazy imaginations determine how what we feel is reality. Let's look again now, or look next, again at Thomas and next at having a troubled heart. If we do find ourselves yielding our reality to things that are not true, you will have a troubled heart. You'll be anxious, you'll be afraid, you'll be worried. You can literally make yourself sick inside from having a troubled heart, just from worrying, from being upset about things that will probably never go wrong. Things that will never happen. Worry about those things anyway. Worry them right into our believing that they are true or will become true, and so our hearts will become troubled. Jesus talked about this in John, but now in 14, a couple pages over, starting with verse 1. He comes right out of the gate, at least for this portion in this chapter of John. He comes right out and he says, "Let not your hearts be troubled." I love that the first word that Jesus uses here is let. He puts it on you. The onus of having a troubled heart or not is in my hands. It's in your hands. It's in my heart. It's in your heart. It is in our control. Jesus says you have the right to decide if your heart is going to be troubled or not. He explains that in some detail, and we'll read it through and come to understand it, but I want you to get that in your head right now. I decide if I have a troubled heart. Just say that where you are, sitting on your couch, or some of you I know are watching from bed. Maybe you're sitting at your table or sitting in your office. Wherever you are right now, just say, I decide if I have a troubled heart. Say it again. I decide if I have a troubled heart. Jesus has said that. Let not your hearts be troubled. Then he goes on, talking to his disciples and those followers of his who were around him. He said, you believe in God, which they had. These people had all been, well, maybe not all, but most of them had been righteous to the ability, to the length that they were able to. They had been righteous in their lives. They had sacrificed. They had given as they should. They had lived a righteous life according to the temple rules, according to the law of Moses. But then Jesus comes along and begins the process of completing that, of finishing all that God had prescribed by the law of Moses and through the temple law. And while Jesus is satisfying all of those conditions, he is now inviting them to put all the faith they had had in that old system in him, the new, better than a system, the reality of Christ among us, Emmanuel, God with us. So when he says, let not your hearts be troubled, he then says, believe in God as you have. Don't stop believing in all that you know to be true about God. He says, but all of that energy, all of that focus, all of that drive, all of that motivation, he said, also put that in me. Believe in me that way. All the faith that you have put in the things of the past, as the behaviors, as the laws, as the requirements are being satisfied, God continues to be as powerful and as glorious and as in charge as he has ever been. And Jesus says, now, believe in me that way. It's really comforting. For us, it's especially comforting who have come to know Jesus in the way that we know him now, but they were meeting him for the first time. This was all so new to them. And he was saying, listen, don't let your hearts be troubled. Yes, you have believed in God. Yes, you have put your faith in him. Continue to. But also believe in me equally. He brings himself, again, he reminds us that he is God. That he is the Son of God and is completely divine. Even as he is fully man, he occupies both spaces perfectly. And he says, believe also in me. Then he says, in my Father's house are many rooms. If it were not so, would I have told you that I go to prepare a place for you? Which he had told them already. And if I go to prepare a place for you, then I will come again and I will take you to myself, that where I am, you may be also. And you know the way to where I am going. So he's just piling on encouragement in a way that I really enjoy, and that I hope that you do that you do too as you read his words. Because he says, I don't want your heart to be troubled. Don't let it. Believe in God. Believe in me. And then he does what I have enjoyed doing many times over the past months. This is a theme that I just keep landing on. He takes the focus off of where they are, and he moves it into eternity. He reminds them again that what is here right now is temporal. What is here right now cannot last. What is here right now is going to only last in my life. What is here right now is only going to last as long as I do. So the things that I worry about, I will not worry about in eternity. The things that bother me, I will not be bothered by in eternity. Nothing carries over. My soul goes and leaves all the crud, all the pain, all the sickness, all the sadness, all the brokenness, all the doubt, all the fear, it departs from it. Your soul and my soul, when we go into eternity, we leave all that stuff. And so he reminds them of that. Don't let your heart be troubled. Believe in God. Believe also in me. And here's why. Because in my Father's house, there are many rooms. And he said, I wouldn't have told you about them if I wasn't planning on taking you there. I am going to prepare a place for you, and then I'm going to come and get you myself. I'm going to come and get you to bring you to me. How joyous is that? How can my heart be troubled when I know that this is all temporal and what is eternal is being prepared for me even now, and that Jesus himself is anxious for the day that he comes to gather me to him, to gather you to him? Whether by our departure from this life individually or whether it's by Christ's return and we who belong to him all depart immediately, he is coming. One way or the other, he's coming to get us. And man, is that good news. Now, if you're attending this service this morning and you have not given your heart to Jesus, that is horrible news. It's horrible because this only applies to we who have said, Jesus, I'm yours, who have put our lives in his hands, who have invited him to take charge of our lives, who have become Christ followers, who follow his example as best we can. If you haven't done that yet, it's bad news because you haven't done that yet. But you can change that right now, immediately, right in this moment. You can say, Jesus, I surrender. I give up. I don't want to be the boss of my life anymore. I choose you. You can invite him today, right in the middle of the sermon. You don't have to wait till the end. You can invite him today to come and live in your heart, in your life, all around you, and begin the process of making you more and more like him, which is a process that we all Christ followers are going through. He is steadily making us more like him until finally in eternity we'll be perfected. Man, that's good news for the Christ follower. It is bad news for any who have not come to him, but it is good news to them that they can immediately become Christ followers too. If you haven't yet, I pray today as I speak that you do, that you just say, Jesus, I'm yours. I believe. You can do that today. And then you can know that Jesus is then preparing a place for you. That he is preparing for you a reality with him, an eternity that is glorious and perfect and painless and just eternal joy. What a gift that is. And I hope that you are finding your way into that reality even as I continue to speak. Because what Jesus said then in verse 4 is, he said, you know the way to where I am going. And this is where we are reintroduced to Thomas. Thomas, who was there listening to all that Jesus is saying, says to him, Lord, we don't know where you're going. How can we know the way? And then Jesus said to him, I am the way. I am the truth, and I am the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. If you had known me, you would have known my Father also. But from now on, you do know him and have seen him. So Jesus says, I'm going to a place, and you know the way. Thomas' reaction to that is, no, we don't. We don't know where you're going, and we don't know the way. But Jesus had been talking about himself. He is the way. He is the truth. He is the life that we all need, that we all crave. If my heart is troubled, it is because and this happens to me. When my heart is troubled, it's because I have turned my attention from the way, which is Jesus, and I'm trying to find my own way, which is nonsense. I can't make my own way apart from him. I can sort of blaze a trail that is ineffective and frustrating and aggravating and that ultimately leads to my demise apart from Jesus. Or I can say, Jesus, you're the way. Let me follow you. Let me lead you through whatever it is I'm going through. If it is a global pandemic, Jesus, you are the way through this thing. So I'm going to follow you down the path, through the way, through this pandemic. You are the way. You know the way. You know the right way. You are the right way. And so I choose to follow you. This is Jesus' declaration to Thomas. When Thomas says, Lord, we don't know where you're going. How can we possibly know the way? Jesus just clarifies for him, Thomas, I'm the way. If you want to come to a glorious eternity, Jesus is the way. If you want to know how to get from where you are right now, point A, Sunday, to point B, Monday, Jesus is the way. If there's trouble through finances, trouble through health, trouble through relationships, trouble through mental, emotional things that you might be struggling with, Jesus is the way through that. Period. There is no other way. Nothing else for eternity works. There are things that might pacify that pain for a little while, but Jesus is the singular, eternal satisfaction to what you need. Just nothing else works. He is the way. He is the truth. He is the life. No one comes to the Father. No one goes into an eternity with Jesus, with God the Father, apart from knowing Jesus. And then he says, if you had known me, he's talking about the past. If you had known me in the past, then you would have known my Father also. You would have seen us together. But they hadn't seen Jesus in the past, though he had always been, not known by the name Jesus, but the Son had always been. He said, if you had known me in the past, then you would have seen us together, seen us as one. But now you literally see him. He said, when you see me, you see him. His exact words are, from now on, you do know him and have seen him. This is Jesus, again, a new declaration that he is making to his disciples and to us today as we read it many years later, that he is God. If you look upon him, if you know him, if you know Jesus, and as you know Jesus, then you know God the Father. Your relationship with Jesus is your relationship with God, which is good news. It gives my heart a reason not to be troubled. It gives my heart a reason not to be afraid. It gives me an opportunity, no matter what's going on around me, to say, I am not going to let my heart be troubled. As he said, let not your hearts be troubled. I'm going to say, Jesus, when something is going on that I don't like, when something is going on that you don't like, when there is trouble all around, you can say, Jesus, you live in me. You occupy my heart. You are the resident there in my soul. And so I choose joy. I choose not to have a troubled heart. And we have to do it. I think probably almost on a daily basis, because trouble comes. Frustration comes, aggravation comes, anxiety comes, fear comes. Many times a day, I imagine, for some of us. In those moments, you can just say, no, I choose not to have a troubled heart. I wish that I was perfect at this. I know that I'm not. Sometimes I actively choose a troubled heart. I actively choose to be worried or afraid or angry. But I don't have to choose those things. When I do, I don't know why I do. And after it's over with, I look back and I think, why did I choose that? It never leaves me feeling better. It's only when I choose not to have a troubled heart. It's only when I choose to allow God to determine my reality instead of my imagination. It is only in those moments that I really do come to feel peace. And it's a lingering peace until the next opportunity I have to make that next decision. Am I going to have a troubled heart or not? You and I have the right to choose whether or not we have a troubled heart. Depending on Jesus, as we've just read, as Jesus has invited us to do, crushes a troubled heart. Now we come to a portion of Scripture. If you just jump over a couple more pages, still in John, to chapter 20. This is the bit that Thomas is the most famous for. This is how he earned the moniker Doubting Thomas. Jesus has risen from the dead. We are steadily, easily, and we're going to do it a little more today, easing away from Easter, which was 2 weeks ago, but still, this is important as we make our way to Pentecost and the awakening they experienced in their day, even as we are discussing and experiencing the awakening that's happening around the world today. We're easing away from Easter. But here, it is a memory, a reminder of what had happened, some of the powerful things that happened just, it seems, in the very few hours right after the resurrection. This is John chapter 20, 24. The disciples were in the upper room, you'll recall, in a room. They had gathered together, worried, scared. The ladies had gone and found the tomb was empty. They had seen Jesus. Jesus had even told the women to tell the disciples, you guys go to Galilee and I'll see you there. And so they're just almost like hovering in I don't know what to do land. And then this happens. Now Thomas, one of the 12, called the twin, was not with them when Jesus came. Jesus, having encountered the women, popped into the room where the disciples are, where they don't know what to do, while they're scared and worried. And they're hearing that Jesus has been seen alive, that the tomb is empty, and John and Peter have run to the tomb and found that Jesus was not there. And it's just, the stories are now growing rapidly, and the disciples don't know what to do. None of them decided that Jesus has risen from the dead. They think the ladies are actually just emotionally overcome. So as they're sitting there trying to decide what to do, Jesus shows up in the room. I love it. I love it so much. He shows up in the room, and Thomas is not there. Jesus engages them, and remarkably, and this is actually really a painful moment to recall, and it's totally a sideline moment. There's not a lot of discussion about what happens, but this is part of sort of the first and more probable timeline. Last week I talked about a second, least probable, but some people agree on it. But this is a more probable timeline where the disciples had gone to this room, they're waiting, and that Peter is among them. In the timeline we discussed last week, Peter was away. But in this timeline, it seems as if Peter was among them, that they were still in Jerusalem. So he's in the room when Jesus shows up and is talking and engaging different ones of them. But it seems as if, just to talk about Peter for a second, it seems as if there is no communication between Peter and Jesus. Peter, who has denied Christ, we remember that, the night that he was betrayed, has stayed hidden, has gone into hiding, but has apparently come back out, and we know that he was with them that morning because he went with John to see the empty tomb, and then they've come back together, but then Jesus shows up in the room, and I can imagine the pain in Peter's chest, the pain in his heart, the strain on him as Jesus is now present in the room, and Peter does not know what to do with this reality. Again, I'm not going to preach last week's sermon again, but I just want to refer to a moment. You'll remember that Cleopas, if you didn't watch last week's sermon, please do go back, and it's very well connected to this one. But you'll remember there was a guy named Cleopas and a friend who's not given a name. A friend of mine and I this week started calling him Jimmy, so whatever. Cleopas and Jimmy had left Emmaus and had come to see the disciples and to tell them that they had seen Jesus. When the disciples encounter them, Cleopas and Jimmy, they say, we've already seen him. He was here with us too. He appeared to us, the disciples, and to Peter. Peter has already been isolated. Though he is among them, they don't count him with them anymore. Though they're struggling to believe, they're struggling to know what to believe, they've decided Peter has denied Christ. And so can't be a part of us anymore. The fact was, Peter had denied Christ. Now, thankfully, we know the rest of the story, that in the days ahead, Jesus came and did appear to Peter. And again, it's the sermon from last week. He was restored. And thankfully, everything was made right. And Peter went on to be a foundational father of the Christian church. But while all these things are happening, Thomas is missing it. He's missing these moments when Jesus comes and doesn't talk to Peter, while apparently addressing the other guys in the room. John lets us know that Thomas wasn't there. So when they finally did see him again, picking back up in verse 25, so the other disciples told him, we have seen the Lord. Isn't that wonderful? We have seen the Lord. But he said to them, Thomas speaking said to them, unless I see his hands and the marks of the nails and place my finger into the mark of the nails and place my hand into his side, I will never believe. And it's at that moment that Thomas becomes doubting Thomas. I don't know that they called him that right away, but I know that in history that is all he has come to be known. He said, and it is harsh, and this is a really good translation from how he would have originally spoken these words. He said, unless I see his hands in the marks of the nails, unless I put my finger into the mark of the nails and place my hand into his side, I will never believe. Man, what an indication of what's going on in Thomas. But you know what? That is what was happening in the rest of them. Slowly they were coming out of their strange post-crucifixion malaise. Slowly they were beginning to accept that something spectacular had happened because evidence of the resurrection was spreading. He was being seen and heard from, and there was evidence. But Thomas was just saying what they had all been feeling before. The ladies on their way to the grave were expecting to find Jesus dead. Peter and John were expecting to find that Jesus' body had been stolen, not that he had been risen from the dead. The disciples in the upper room were expecting to be arrested because they thought Jesus was dead, possibly that his body was stolen. Even when the ladies came and said, no, he's alive, we saw him, they were like, nah, you're crazy. They were all feeling that way. Thomas just said it. He's just saying it a while later because he hasn't had any of the experiences that those people have had. And so he is where they were in a land of doubt. You and I do that all the time. Even when the evidence around us is that, no, everything's okay. Everything's going to be good. We're like, nope, not until I see it. I won't believe until I see it. Jesus is good enough and big enough and strong enough and powerful enough and glorious enough that even when I say, no, I will not believe it until you prove it, he goes, all right, watch this. And then he proves himself over and over again, only because he is glorified by that, and I am encouraged by it. He helps me with my unbelief. He helps you with your unbelief. Now listen to this. Here he comes for Thomas. Still John 20, verse 26. 8 days later, Thomas has been sitting on this now for more than a week. 8 days later, Jesus' disciples were again all together inside, and Thomas was there this time. Although the doors were locked, Jesus came and stood among them, and he said, peace be with you. How fun is that? They are locked up, still afraid, still confused about what's going on with the resurrection. Thomas still doesn't believe, and I can imagine the arguments in this week that Thomas has been having with all of them. I'm imagining them. There is no record of them. I'm imagining it. Jesus comes and just is in the room. He allows them to see him. You know what the truth is? He was always there. He's always everywhere. He's here right now. He could, if he wanted to, just allow us to see, to perceive his physical presence here. I would definitely pass out, and I don't expect that to happen, but it could happen. He can do what he wants. He's God. So he allowed them in that room to perceive his presence, his physical presence, to see him. And what would you do? I don't even know what I would do. It would just be astounding. But when he shows up, he says, hey guys, peace be with you. It is translated. But he says, hey, how is everybody? I hope you're doing okay. And then he immediately turns his attention to Thomas. So good. Then he said to Thomas exactly what Thomas had said he required. He said, put your finger here. He holds out his hands and he says, put your finger here and see my hands. And then he says, and put your hand out and touch my side. Just exactly what Thomas had demanded. He said, Jesus speaking, do not disbelieve, but believe. Jesus' physical presence, as it was this day, was not in the room when Thomas said these things. Jesus' presence was there. He was there. He is as present everywhere all the time as he ever can be. You are drenched in his presence right now. So am I. It never stops. We're accustomed to it. It's wild. But we are never not saturated by his presence. So when Thomas said what he said 8 days before, I will not believe unless I get to I touch the scars in his hands, put my hand in his side. I mean, it's almost as if Thomas he disbelieved enough that he was adding a little hyperbole to what he was saying. Like, I'm not going to believe anything unless I'll touch his scars and I can ram my hand in the side, then I'll believe. So then Jesus shows up and says, all right, hotshot, here's my hands, touch them. Go ahead, put your hand in my side. And Thomas must have been like wrecked by this. I would have been. Surely you would have been. Thomas's response in verse 28, after having had this brief exchange with Jesus, Thomas said, my Lord and my God. Of course he did. He declared, you are the Lord. You are my God. And then Jesus said to him, Have you believed because you've seen me? He's like, Thomas, this is what it took. After all we've been through, after all you should know about me, this is what it took for you to believe. Not chastising him, but clarifying. This is what it required for you to believe, and I showed up and provided. That is how real Jesus is. Have you believed because you have seen me? Okay, but then blessed are those who have not seen and yet believe. That's you. That's me. That's everybody that's sitting in this room. It's everyone who will attend this service over the next days, weeks, maybe months from now. Every person who has come to know Christ from the moment of his resurrection until today, all of us, I'm sorry, from his ascension until today, all of us who have not seen him in the flesh, billions of people from his ascension until today, Jesus says, blessed are all of those people who have not seen him face to face in the flesh, and yet they believe. What proof do you require that he cannot provide? That he has not already provided? How many times in my life has God shown up or has done things, has Jesus done something that is so evidently him? And I'll be so faith-filled and I'll be so encouraged and my heart will just be so at ease until the next time something goes wrong, and then I'm just right back off the wagon again, worried, scared, sick, sad, letting fear win, letting doubt win for a moment, for a minute, for a day, a week, a month. No, we are not designed for that. You are not designed for that. Jesus came so that you could be free from every dark thing, and that absolutely includes doubt and fear. So this morning, my encouragement to you, really Jesus' encouragement to you from his own word is, let not your heart be troubled. Crush doubt. Crush fear. There is no evil thing. There is no weapon formed against you that can prosper. None. We can decide to let doubt win. We can decide to have a troubled heart. But if we decide not to, Jesus in you and Jesus in me is all that we need to overcome it. So Jesus, I pray that you would help us. This is a tall wall for us to climb over in our humanity. It's just difficult sometimes because we really do get our focus on a false reality. We imagine the worst, and then we come to believe that the worst is absolute, that it's going to happen. Well, that's just a lie. It's a lie that the devil tells all day, every day, and people believe it, and it sidetracks us, it slows us down, it makes us ineffective. And I just pray this morning over everyone who's attending and who will attend this service. Would you please remind us that we have the right to choose whether or not our hearts are going to be troubled? You said that we shouldn't. We should just let not our hearts be troubled because you live in our heart. How can I yield to darkness when I am filled with light? I'm filled with truth. I'm filled with the way, the truth, and the life. It all comes from you. And you live in each of us who have called ourselves Christ followers, who have determined to seek you, to know you, and to live by your example. So, Father, I pray for peace and joy and hope and health in the lives of my family and friends who are attending this service. I ask that you would bolster them, that you would encourage them with the reality that you live in them. And so there is no reason for them to doubt. There is no reason for them to fear. That you have already crushed those evil presences. And you have done so that we can celebrate and glorify you, and so that we can be blessed by experiencing the freedom of not being hampered by them. So this morning we all say it together, Jesus. We have the choice, and we choose to have a happy heart. We choose to have hearts at peace. No matter what the news says, no matter what the situation looks like, no matter what our imaginations can stir up, we choose the truth. And the truth is you. We choose joy, and that is you. We choose hope, and hope is in you. And you are in us. And it just can't get better than that. We love you, and we thank you, and we look forward to even greater things ahead as you show us the way through all that we endeavor to sometimes just survive, and I believe at other times, most of the time, to excel in this life. For your glory and for our good, I pray. Amen. Please let me encourage you in the rest of this week to keep referring back to John 14, to let not your heart be troubled. If you start to feel like trouble is coming, resist it. Resist it in Jesus' name. Taryn is going to bring us a couple of little pieces of information, some updates. Don't disconnect. Let me come back and spend a little time with you in just a minute. I have a closing word, and I just don't want you to go yet. So let's just hang out for a couple more minutes. I'll see you in just a bit.
Hi y'all, happy Sunday. Just a few announcements here from Coast Life Church. The first one is make sure that you're checking out our Facebook page. We are posting updates, we're posting really fun activities, and some things from Pastor D. You can check in every week with DN3, which is just a cool little video from Pastor D that has Bible verses and some interesting info for us all. Also, not only can you catch our live service here on Facebook, but you can catch our live service on our YouTube channel, and we are now streaming on our website, coastlifechurch.net. So if you haven't checked it out, it is there and available for you 24/7. And lastly, if you are in need of anything, please let someone at our church know. We have great resources, and we are here to help you out. Hope you have a fantastic week. Bye, y'all.
Thank you, Taryn. As you have been giving, I just want to thank you so much for being so generous, so faithful, so obedient with your tithes and offerings and additional giving that people have been providing so we can continue to serve the world around us. You have been great, and you do that. You do that now as you have been by clicking on the link that's right above me and hooking into Easy Tithe. If you don't have an Easy Tithe account, you can sure do it that way. Or you can text to give. If you just text the word give to 228-200-0907, that'll hook you also into Easy Tithe. And some of you have even been mailing in your tithes and offerings, which is such a blessing. So thank you for the way in which you have been giving and generous, faithful, obedient. You are the very best. I just love our church family. My last word for you is let not your heart be troubled. Believe in God. Believe in Jesus, because in the end, he wins, and so do we. It just doesn't get any better than that. Have a wonderful week. I will see you Tuesday with these new DN3s. Who knows what I'm going to say? I'm only going to have 3 minutes, and I'm going to have a timer. I'm not going to make it. I'll see you then. I love you guys, and I will see you soon.